World War I. The Western Front descended into a 400-mile trench system. Around 8.5 million soldiers died. The Somme cost 57,470 British casualties in one day. Soldiers lived knee-deep in mud with corpses, vermin, and filth everywhere. Rain flooded trenches to waist level, causing trench foot that turned toes black and required amputation. Lice fed on blood while rats swarmed the wounded. Chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas burned lungs and eyes, suffocating men within minutes. Crude fabric masks offered little protection. Minor wounds became lethal infections without antibiotics. Disease killed twice as many as combat. Shell shock was mistaken for cowardice. About 306 British soldiers were executed for desertion despite suffering combat trauma. Eastern Front. World War II. Operation Barbarossa opened the largest land campaign in history. An estimated 30 million died, more than any other theater. By late 1941, more German troops were hospitalized for frostbite than wounds. Temperatures fell to -30°C. Boots and rifles froze solid. Soldiers awoke frozen to death. At Stalingrad, men fought room to room with knives and bare fists. Starving troops ate rats or boiled wallpaper paste. The Germans captured 5 million Soviets, of whom 2.8 million died in captivity from starvation and exposure. Field hospitals were overwhelmed or non-existent. Soviet soldiers fought in worn uniforms with little winter gear. Iran-Iraq War. This 8-year stalemate became a prolonged bloodbath. Each side suffered 500,000 to 800,000 deaths. Iraq used chemical weapons extensively. In March 1988, poison gas killed 5,000 at Halabja. Many Iranian combatants were teenagers, some as young as 14, sent in human waves against minefields. Summer temperatures exceeded 120 Fahrenheit, while winters turned swampy. Iranian soldiers often had no gear against chemicals, wearing homemade masks or nothing. They suffered burns, blindness, paralysis, and nerve damage. Field hospitals ran out of medicine. Veterans still live with chronic illnesses decades later. Vietnam War. U.S. deaths were 58,000, Vietnamese in the hundreds of thousands. Vietnam's jungles were a constant enemy. Dense foliage limited visibility to feet. Temperatures exceeded 100 Fahrenheit with near 100% humidity. Monsoons flooded everything for days. Soldiers carried 60 to 80 pounds through thick mud. Malaria-carrying mosquitoes swarmed constantly. About 25,000 malaria cases in 1 year. Jungle rot plagued everyone. Trench foot caused gangrene and amputation. The Viet Cong struck with booby traps and tunnel ambushes anytime. No frontline existed. The U.S. sprayed 20 million gallons of Agent Orange. The dioxin caused cancers, birth defects, and neurological disorders in veterans that persist today. Napoleonic invasion of Russia. In 1812, Napoleon assembled 450,000 men to force victory over Russia. Russians retreated, burning everything behind them. This scorched earth strategy deprived the army of food and shelter. Borodino saw 70,000 casualties in one day. Napoleon reached Moscow to find it abandoned and burning. The real horror came during retreat. Almost no soldiers had winter equipment. Temperatures plunged to -30°C. Frostbite spread like wildfire. Horses collapsed and were butchered. Men starved and froze. By November, more than half had perished from cold, hunger, typhus, and dysentery. The Berezina crossing turned to chaos. Many drowned. Only 20,000 to 50,000 or 450,000 remained capable of fighting. The campaign cost 380,000 French lives. American Civil War. An estimated 620,000 soldiers died, the highest U.S. toll. The deadliest enemy was disease. 2/3 of deaths came from dysentery, typhoid, and infections. Camps were filthy with overflowing latrines contaminating water. Outbreaks of measles, pneumonia, and malaria swept ranks. Surgeons operated without sterilizing or washing hands. Limbs were sawed off with no anesthetic, then patients died of infection. One hospital recorded 57,000 diarrheal cases. The mini ball tore through flesh. Amputation was default treatment. Flies swarmed open wounds. Without antibiotics, gangrene and tetanus were common. Disease killed more than rifles. 30 Years' War. This conflict from 1618 to 1648 involved France, Spain, Sweden, and the Habsburgs. Armies were mostly unpaid mercenary bands. Historians estimate 4.5 to 8 million died. Some German regions lost half their population. For soldiers, it was chaos, with no stable battlefronts. Troops looted villages with no supply lines. Mercenaries preyed on civilians, extorting food. Villages were sacked completely. Dysentery and typhus swept camps. Plague was common. Medical care was non-existent. Infection followed any wound. During sieges, starvation killed dozens daily. Armies mutinied over lack of pay. Deserters were flogged or hanged. By war's end, Germany was a wasteland. Korean War. North Korea invaded in June 1950. By mid-1951, the front stabilized at the 38th parallel. Over 3 years, 1 million soldiers died, with total casualties reaching 2 to 3 million. Despite this, the border barely moved. Extreme cold defined it. U.S. Marines at Chosin Reservoir fought in -36 Fahrenheit. Frostbite caused more casualties than bullets. Boots and rifles froze. Many lost fingers and toes. Some froze solid in sleep. After 1951, trenches and bunkers changed by just yards at massive cost. Soldiers climbed hills under mortar fire. POW camps were notorious for starvation and forced marches. Many wounded lay on snowy hills overnight. Crimean War. From 1853 to 1856, Russia fought Britain, France, the Ottomans, and Sardinia. Roughly 400,000 to 600,000 died, disease far exceeding combat. Over 130,000 died of disease versus 60,000 in combat. Allies sat helpless during winter 1854 to 1855 with chaotic supply lines. Thousands died because they had no boots, coats, or tents. British death rate was 22.7%. Many froze before combat. Trenches were primitive and wet. Latrines overflowed into water and cholera swept ranks. Cholera killed many times more than bullets. Field hospitals had no running water. Surgeons operated in freezing cold without anesthesia. By war's end, preventable disease killed more than any battle. Russo-Japanese War. From 1904 to 1905, roughly 130,000 soldiers died, and 300,000 were wounded. Port Arthur's 5-month siege cost Russians 91,000 casualties. Japanese suffered 55,000 taking it. Trench warfare was common across frozen hills. Winter 1904 to 1905 was bitterly cold. Troops lacked winter clothing. Wounded died of exposure. Frostbite, typhoid, and dysentery were rampant. Both armies had poor logistics. Rations trickled in. Soldiers went hungry in open trenches. At Tsushima, Russia's Baltic fleet was annihilated. Thousands drifted on crippled ships, then drowned or froze. Field hospitals were overwhelmed. Many bled out or died of infection. Kalinga War. Ashoka's conquest of Kalinga around 261 BCE was one of India's bloodiest battles. The Mauryan army clashed with Kalinga's warriors on the Bay of Bengal coast. Ashoka's own inscriptions claim 100,000 Kalinga soldiers killed and 150,000 deported, roughly 250,000 total deaths. Fighting took place on the tropical coastal plain amid dense jungles and rivers. The climate sapped men's strength with monsoon downpours turning camps and battlefields into swamps. Humidity was extreme with summer temperatures around 35 degrees Celsius. Soldiers marched through heat exhaustion with malaria and mosquitoes as serious hazards. Armies bivouacked in temporary camps of tents or thatch shelters. Camps were crowded and unsanitary with open latrines and swarms of insects. Monsoons swamped camps and spoiled clothes. Heavy rains ruined grain stores and sickened water. Malaria, dysentery, and fevers were endemic. Ancient medical care was rudimentary with only herbal remedies. Disease often killed more than battle. Iron swords, spears, archery, and thousands of war elephants gave terrifying shock value. Combat was hand-to-hand and extremely bloody. Ashoka's edict calls the fields turning red by the dye of Kalinga's blood. The carnage was immense. Ashoka himself abandoned conquest afterward, noting he felt deep remorse at the suffering. And Lushan Rebellion. This devastating civil war in Tang China from 755 to 763 began when General An Lushan led troops against the Tang court. By late 756, rebel forces controlled much of northern China, including the capitals. Contemporary censuses show 53 million people in 755, but only 17 million by 764. Scholars estimate millions perished from war, famine, and plague. Armies of hundreds of thousands fought across the North China plain. Soldiers faced sweltering heat in summer and freezing winds in winter. Armies camped in fields or city outskirts during sieges. Camps were crowded, muddy, and unsanitary with defecation near living areas. Troops slept on the ground without blankets. Chronic shortages plagued both sides. During the siege of Suiyang in 757, defenders were down to tiny rice rations, then ate tree bark, beetles, and grass roots. Eventually, all insects, animals, and vegetation had been eaten. Out of 6,800 defenders, only 1,600 lived to the end. They resorted to cannibalizing the dead. Disease devastated camps with cholera, typhus, and dysentery common. Wounded were seldom treated beyond basic herbal poultices. High fever and infection were fatal. The Tang court executed officials and officers for failures. Defectors had their families killed. Rebels showed no mercy with punishments including flaying or beheading. Mongol-Khwarezm War. Genghis Khan's campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire from 1219 to 1221 was legendary for its slaughter. The Mongol horde invaded with around 90,000 to 200,000 men. Over 2 years, Mongols systematically razed cities including Urgench, Merv, Nishapur, and Samarkand. Medieval chroniclers claim 2 to 15 million perished in fighting and famine. The terrain was harsh with arid steppes and deserts of Central Asia. Summers were scorching, well over 40 degrees Celsius, with bitter winters and deep snow and mountain passes. Armies crossed wastelands with scarce water. Dust storms and heat caused heat stroke and dehydration. Mongol camps were basic yurts with mud floors and no sanitation. Soldiers slept outdoors under sparse cover, leading to illness. The Mongols lived off the land, subsisting on dried meat and horse meat. Rivers were vital but could foul in summer heat. Thirst was deadly. The dusty conditions bred respiratory infections, dysentery, and scurvy. Wounded often became infected without antiseptics. Mongols used reflex bows, short swords, and catapults. Their tactic was fire and withdraw using mobility to encircle enemies. The terror was profound. Survivors knew surrender rarely spared them, as massacres were routine. Merva's population was exterminated. Mongols tortured captives by skinning alive or impaling. Generals who lost face triggered slaughter of entire cities. Upon capturing cities, Mongols forced captives into deadly construction or executed them. Victory ended with mass executions of any who didn't open the gates. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to see more content like that.